Cristina Fominaya is an author and editor-in-chief of the leading journal Social Movement Studies. She joins us now from Nottingham in the UK. Thank you so much for being with us. We appreciate it. You know, just on a practical scale, not an emotional one, these protests would seem absurd because it's simply a temporary, public safety measure that's really just the best we have until there is a vaccination. People wear seatbelts, people wear motorcycle helmets according to the law. Why this resistance to, protect other people by wearing a simple mask?
Yeah, I think this is a very complex phenomenon. So I don't think it's simple at all. And I think we're just really beginning to understand it. There's a lot more going on here than a debate about masks. I think masks is probably the least of it. On the one hand, as your show just showed, you've got political actors who are using disinformation as a political tool to sow confusion, distrust, and disorder, and to channel fear and anger. And you've shown that there's clear links to the far right, but not only the far right. But on the other hand, you've also got people who might start off from a very different place. They might be suffering from isolation or anxiety about the pandemic. They might go online looking for spiritual guidance or alternative health remedies, and they end up in a private group that's peddling conspiracy theories and disinformation. So more generally, I think we need to think about the fact that we have a series of interrelated crises that are happening simultaneously that really enable these protests to thrive. One is a public health crisis, of course, the economic crisis. There's also a crisis of democratic legitimacy with a decline in trust for government institutions and representatives, which gets worse if the coronavirus is handled badly by governments. But we also have a crisis of belief in science, which is closely related to these widespread information disorders that are fueled by social media. So we see a lot of disinformation and misinformation about COVID flying around, even people, as you pointed out, that deny COVID even exists. So anti-maskers need to be understood as part of this wider phenomenon.
Okay. It's not really just about denying science. It's also about these conspiracy theories and how they spread across social media, where people find acceptance with what would usually be very marginalized and rare kind of ideas. They find a following, they find a group, and we're seeing, thousands, if not millions of people buying into it. Let me ask if you've ever in history actually seen that before, where conspiracy theories have been able to take such hold over the public.
I don't know the historical, I'm not an expert in conspiracy theories, so I don't know the answer to the historical part, but I would say that now the existence of social media really plays an important role. And I think we need to understand that if we're going to understand how to combat this issue. Because social media not only serves as a vehicle for the spread of disinformation and as a vehicle for the calls to protest, but it also brings previously disconnected people together. So, for example, Facebook has been taking down millions of pieces of coronavirus-related misinformation, but at the same time, Facebook and YouTube's algorithms tend to push people towards more extreme content. And they also bring different topics together in shared spaces. So these QAnon groups that you can find COVID conspiracy theories in, you also are finding alternative health and religious groups in there. So somebody might start off on an anti-lockdown page because they're frustrated or they want to find out more about it and they don't think it's a good idea. And then they get directed by algorithm suggestions over into QAnon conspiracy theories. And that's where those common ideas can take hold. So the idea that masks are ineffective and that they limit your ability to breathe, which is completely false. So
let me ask you this, though, just on the most human level possible, for those who just say the coronavirus doesn't really exist, the whole thing is just a hoax, how do you explain that actual, lack of empathy whereby people feel only if it happens to me is it really happening?
Well, there was a really fascinating video that a nurse put out on Twitter that I was watching the other day. And she was a nurse somewhere in Idaho, I can't remember exactly, and she was saying that even with their dying breath, she had patients who were denying that they were dying of COVID. So I think it's not just a question of empathy. I think it's a question of how far can you get people to believe something that isn't true, and what are the mechanisms that propagate that kind of information. I mean, I think, there was a study in France that you referred to, a study, it may be the same one, um, of anti-maskers, and showing that they strongly tend to distrust government. They tended to be more right-wing. They were very prone to conspiracy theories, and they tended to get most of their information off the internet. And as you also pointed out, the most alarming thing about them is that 94% said that they would refuse to get a vaccine if it were available. So it's really troubling to see how the lack of trust in government and the scientific knowledge and the political weaponization of disinformation and misinformation translates directly into illnesses and deaths. But this isn't a problem just with the pandemic. This is a much bigger problem with information disorders and the threat they pose to democracy. Because obviously, for democracies to work properly, we need our citizens to be well informed and to trust in information and to trust in government.
Right. That is frightening. Okay, Cristina Fominaya, thank you really so much for taking the time to talk to us. We appreciate it.